Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down some of the bigger questions as we head into this year. Who is this year's Indiana? Can the SEC find their way back up to the top of the sport after a 2 year hiatus? A lot of stuff to watch for this upcoming year, and it's going to be an awesome one. But another thing to watch as we get into this season is just teams that can make their CFP debut. There are a couple of teams on here that I think very well might this upcoming year, especially over in the Big 12. Feel pretty confident someone's going to make their CFP debut over there, unless Arizona State likes to ruin the party once again this year. But let's go ahead and jump into this. And these are rankings technically. These aren't really rankings. They're just 10 teams that kind of stood out to me as top 10 teams, but you can put them in any order you'd like. But let's kick it off here with the Utah Utes. This is absolutely a team that can make it happen. It's a team I talked about last time when I was talking about teams to buy as we head into this year. Love the addition of Devin Dampier. I think he's as good as it gets at the quarterback position, especially behind an elite offensive line. Was not behind that last year at New Mexico. So you add in Jason Beck as well, his offensive coordinator from New Mexico. I think it's going to be a really talented offense. I think they have all the ability in the world to run the ball very effectively. I think obviously Kyle Whittingham comes off last year a little bit frustrated with the way that things went down. And I think when you look back at last year, Cam Rising is on the field. This team is firmly in the conversation in the Big 12. That's how big of a difference that move made from Cam Rising to Isaac Wilson. They now have the quarterback in my eyes. So I think Kyle Whittingham is probably shaping up for this to be his last season. I think he wants to go out with a bang, and I think he could very well make the CFP for the first time. He barely missed out a couple of years ago when they beat Caleb Williams in the Pac-12 championship, but I think they can win the Big 12 this time around and be firmly in that CFP conversation. Might just be the representative from the Big 12. South Carolina has to fall into this group, and I think it's got to be the Lenora Sellers show. Excuse me. I think he's got to be the guy that, I don't want to say drags this team, but leads this team in a large part of the way to the national title, or at least to the CFP. I think him and Dylan Stewart need to be game wreckers. I think the wide receiver group makes me a little bit nervous. Really love what Nick Harvard brings to the table. Hasn't quite been able to put it together. Defense is losing big time players like Tonka Hemingway, like Kyle Kennard, like Demetrius Knight Jr. It's going to be really hard to Nick Emunwari. It's going to be really hard to replace all those guys on the defensive side of the ball. They have some really incredible players. But the way that I see this, if Lenora Sellers can put together a Jaden Daniels Heisman type season, I don't know if it's going to be that crazy, but I think he can put together that level of season. If Dylan Stewart on the other side can make impact plays every single week, can be an absolute game wrecker for this team, much like he was very early on in the season last year, this can be a team that makes the CFP. It's a little bit of more of a tightrope walk with a lot of different things going into it. But if this team finds a way to get past LSU, I believe in week 6, undefeated, if they can win that game and move forward, which will be a huge revenge game for them, I think they could very well be on their way to their first CFP. I'm not super bullish on this team, but when you have players on both sides of the ball like Lenora Sellers and like Dylan Stewart, you got talent and you got the guys to absolutely do it. You can take over this college football world and possibly make the CFP. Sticking in the SEC, Florida is absolutely a team that can do this. It all comes down to DJ Lagway's health, and I'm a little bit worried. If that calf strain is a very real thing, we've all seen what that could possibly lead to, which is a torn Achilles, which would keep him out not only for the rest of this year, but maybe the early parts of next year. So you got to be very careful with this kid. At the same time, the kid's got to play football, and he's got to be on the field for you to be successful. So you're walking a little bit of a tightrope early in the season. If he can get healthy, if you can feel confident that he is going to be healthy throughout the year, and on defense you have Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp that can totally destroy every offensive line they play, can be total game wreckers, you could be a 9-3 or 10-2 team, and I think you get into the field that way. I think this is a schedule that is tough enough. I think you play enough marquee games that if you get to 9-3, you got to have a win over an LSU or a Georgia or a Texas at some point this season to get to a 9-3, and I think that would be enough. I think you would be in the field. Obviously, a lot of stuff around them would decide that, but at the end of the day, I think they have the guys. I think they can make some big-time plays, and as long as DJ Lagway is healthy, I'm not going to bet against Florida. Texas Tech comes in at 7 here. Obviously, a team that can make it happen. Team that probably around the country up their talent more than anyone else in the country, in the Big 12 especially. The talent they have is unlike anyone else in the entire conference. Now, there are a couple of really talented players across the league, but when you look at the defensive line additions they made, in David Bailey, in Romello Height, and Lee Hunter, they're going to have dudes up front, and dudes that not a lot of other guys who are on the conference have. And then you have a third-year quarterback. You do have talent outside, a little bit worried about the wide receiver group, but I think they have enough there to make it happen, especially if Micah Hudson can take the next step after a very confusing offseason for him. Obviously, I think you got to go into Utah and get a win. And I think if you do go into Utah and get a win, you're in the Big 12 title. Obviously, you got to handle your business from there. There were a couple of times I probably said that last season, and then the team fell on their face against Kansas more than likely. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a team that has all the ability in the world. I love the coach in Joey McGuire. I think they can make the Big 12 title, and then you're just a game away from the CFP. I'm right in between on Texas Tech. I want to be very bullish. I want to be very excited about this team, but I have just enough questions to make me give me a little bit of a pause. But at the end of the day, I do think Texas Tech has the ability to make their first CFP, and then we'll see what happens from there. They have the talent up front that might be able to compete a little bit better against some of these teams than other Big 12 teams would. The Big 12 team that has the best odds to make the CFP is Kansas State, and I fully agree with them. I think Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards in the backfield is as fun of a run game as you're going to find across the country this year. Jace Brown is back at wide receiver, and then you have a linebacker duo in Austin Romaine and Desmond Purnell that about as good as you're going to find in the country. Really, really experienced guys that are going to hold down the middle of that defense. The one big question is, can you win that week 0 game? I think both those teams, Iowa State and Kansas State, can make a CFP run. You got to win that first game. If you don't win that first game, you're walking an absolute tightrope the rest of the way in a conference that is probably going to get pretty messy for every single team. And the big thing to know going into that, and we'll break it down closer to that game, but George Fitzpatrick, the starting right tackle, I believe, for Kansas State going into the season, will not be available for that game. We'll see what happens throughout the season with him, but definitely a big-time blow. But they are the team to beat in the Big 12 as of right now, and I think they could very well be the team that we find in the CFP in December. Georgia Tech comes in at number 5. This is the sexy pick right now. This is the team that everyone seems to be circling as the team that could possibly make an Indiana-type run. Schedule does set up pretty nicely with only Clemson and Georgia on the schedule as outright really, really tough games. Everything else they probably should be favored in. And you head into a season with Haynes King back, Jamal Haynes in the backfield, Malik Rutherford. You bring in Eric Rivers from FIU that I think is going to be one of the household names by about week 4 this season. I think they have all the ability in the world to make some things happen. You got to get the win in week 1. If you go to Colorado and lose that game, I think you're in a tough spot moving forward, but they could lose that game to Clemson. They could lose that game to Georgia. As long as you win that week 1, you could be firmly in a spot for an ACC title and then playing for a spot in the CFP. Obviously, if you lose those 2 games and then lose in the ACC title, maybe if it's Clemson and other things work out, you're in a good position still, but I think you'll probably have to win that game if you want to make that happen. Now, if you beat Clemson or you beat Georgia throughout that time, maybe you could lose that game and still make the CFP. So a lot on the table for Georgia Tech. Obviously, got to handle business. Can't have one of those bottoming out games that they've had in the past couple of years, but very talented, very veteran team that absolutely has a schedule that could set up for a CFP run. Ole Miss is going to be on this list. There's no doubt about it. The talent is absolutely there. Austin Simmons is really cool. He's one of those players that I have become infatuated with throughout this offseason. Throws the ball very confidently, enrolled 2 years early in college, and has already graduated from college at 19 years old. He's a very interesting individual and a very good head on his shoulders. The talent they have at wide receiver, Caden Lee, Deshaun Stribling coming in from Oklahoma State, Harrison Wallace coming in from Penn State. I love Caleb Odom coming in from Alabama over the season. So they have the ability to put together a really good offense. Obviously, Lane Kiffin makes that a whole lot easier. There's no doubt about that. But then the defensive side of the ball makes me a little bit more worried. I think Sunshine Perkins is a beast. I think he could be a total breakout star this upcoming year. I worry about a rebuilt back end. For the second year in a row, you're totally rebuilding a secondary that just needs to get a whole lot better. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, a lot of different things happening. I don't think they have a Trey Amos on this team, but I could very well be wrong. There's a lot of talent on that roster, and they're absolutely a team that, if they can put it together this year, especially Austin Simmons, they could be firmly in the CFP this upcoming year. Miami, obviously, is going to be on this list. They replace Cam Ward with Carson Beck, and hoping things continue upward. Obviously, they got to find difference makers in the wide receiver room. I love a lot of the players that they have. I think Keelan Marion is going to be a great player coming over from BYU. JoJo Trader, incredibly talented. I think could be a first-round wide receiver in a couple of years, but has quite a ways to go. They have an offensive line that's going to be as good as you find in the country. The running back room with Jordan Lyle and Mark Fletcher, I think, is plenty talented. They're going to have the guys offensively. I'm not super worried about that. Obviously, a little bit worried about Carson Beck with not elite wide receivers, but at the end of the day, I think they have enough guys. I think Shannon Dawson will put together a good offense. The defense just has to take a massive step forward. Corey Heatherman comes in from Minnesota. Ruben Bain is going to be a factor, has to be maybe a bigger factor than he was a year ago. The secondary's got to be considerably better than it was a year ago. I think they have the talent. They brought in a lot of really, really talented guys. They did that last year. So they got to be very careful. They got to make sure that everything works out. But Miami, if they can get off to a really nice start against Notre Dame, if they win that game, they're going to be off running. They will absolutely be the team that will be in line to meet Clemson in the ACC championship and very well could be in the playoff before they even play that game, depending on how the season goes for Miami. Texas A&M here at 2, absolutely a team that can make a run to the CFP this upcoming year. Marcel Reed is the big question here. How do you feel about Marcel Reed? I feel like there's no one right in the middle on Marcel Reed. There is either he is going to be a superstar this upcoming season or at least in the future in his career, or he's just not the guy. He's a guy that can't throw downfield, that can't make the plays that they're going to need to be made. I tend to fall somewhere in the middle, a little bit more towards him being a star, because I think this kid can make all the plays in the world. I think he is a lot like what Colin Klein was in college, a little bit more athletic, a little bit faster, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, I do think it makes a lot of sense. I think the fit is perfect. Obviously, you got a big game against Notre Dame in week 3. If you get that win, they're going to be a really hard team to stop. Obviously, you still have LSU, Texas, South Carolina, Missouri on the schedule. You go 2-2 in those games, you're probably in the CFP, especially with the Notre Dame win. So you're in a position where A&M's going to have to put it together. There's no doubt about that. But when I look at the offense, I think they could be as explosive as you're going to find in the country. I love a lot of the pieces they have on defense, and Mike Elko's calling plays on defense. So I'm not super worried about that unit. I think this is going to be a really good team. Will they find a way to go 8-4 again? Probably. But at the end of the day, I am going to buy into A&M as we head into this season. I'll wait on my predictions to give you an outright belief of what I think of them. It might end up being 8-4 if I'm being totally honest, but at the end of the day, I think A&M has the talent, has the quarterback. I think if they put it all together, this could very well be a playoff team. And then I had to give some love to the G5 in this segment. Tulane is going to be on this list as well, whether it's Caden Simonza from Ball State or it's Jake Retzlaff who just came over. I think this is a team that absolutely can be the G5 representative in the CFP. Tough non-conference, whether it's Northwestern, Duke, or Ole Miss. They play all 3 of them. You probably got to win one of those games, if I'm being totally honest. I think you can get in at 10-2 because of the non-con that you play. I think you can lose to Duke and you can lose to Ole Miss and be totally fine. I really do think that, especially if you run the table in the American, win that conference at 11-2. But if you lose those 3 games early on in the season, is that recoverable? I tend to believe it should be. I don't know if it will be. So that'll be something to watch. They could lose to Duke and Darien Mensa. They could lose to Ole Miss and still be firmly in this thing. So I love this Tulane team. I think they have all the ability in the world. I think Shaz Preston is someone that is going to explode onto the scene, especially in the G5 this upcoming season. And I think Tulane could very well make this run, especially if they get that week 1 win over Northwestern. But a lot of different teams to watch in the season. I realized I didn't have any Big Ten teams on that. So Illinois, Indiana, maybe Nebraska could absolutely be teams that fall, not Indiana, Illinois and Nebraska could absolutely be teams that fall into this category. Maybe a Washington or a Michigan State, but that's something we can talk about a little bit later. Obviously, there's quite a few teams that would love to make this list and would love to be new CFP members. I think we got 6 new ones last year. I would be surprised if we got 6 new ones this year, but maybe 5 or 4 new teams in the CFP is not surprising at all to me, and I think a lot of them could come from that list. But that'll do it for this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. We'll get into the coaches poll on Friday. We'll talk a little bit more about fall camp. We'll get into maybe another top 10 list. And then next week, it's all predictions. We're going to go, I think, SEC, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and then playoff all the way throughout the week. We're going to break it all down, give you players to watch in every conference, maybe for every team. We'll give you my offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, my champion, all of that good stuff. And then on Friday, we'll get into the playoff, and all of it is going to be very hard to do. I'll say that right about now. I won't feel confident in just about any of the picks that I will make next week, but that's the good thing about college football. You never feel fully confident in what you're doing at any given moment, especially in talking season. But that'll do it for Just Another College Football Podcast this time around. We will be back Friday, and we'll break down all the other stuff that we missed throughout the week. Tons of stuff to break down, and I'm sure there will be quite a few fall camp things to talk about, but we'll break it all down on Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys around.